Hey guys, what is going on? Anthony here with Pistons Talk Podcast. Hope you guys are having a great evening so far. I'm gonna do a quick little reaction podcast video tonight. As you guys are watching this, this is pre-recorded. Just giving you guys some heads up. If you're listening on the audio side, we're going to be reacting to a depth chart piece written by James Edwards III of The Athletic. This is his final piece as a Detroit Pistons beat reporter. If you guys did not hear already, James is actually taking a beat reporter job with The Athletic with the New York Knicks. So we're going to have two new beat reporters from The Athletic and the Detroit News. So I think the only two left that were from last year are Corey Woods and Omari. So some change around the Detroit Pistons beat this year. But hey, man, I'm excited to get into James's final piece. This is a depth chart piece, if you will. So we're going to get into the depth chart piece. And I'm going to share my screen with you guys. So here we go. So this was James's depth chart piece. Now, obviously, he did starting lineup, he did bench, and he had some guys that may or may not get some playing time. So we're going to get into the starting lineup first. So the starting lineup, he has Cade Cunningham at point guard, Asar Thompson at shooting guard, Simone Fontecchio at small forward, Tobias Harris at power forward, and Jalen Duren at center. So I think we'll get into the starting lineup. Getting to the bench, he has Jaden Ivey backing up Cade Cunningham at point guard, Malik Beasley backing up Asar Thompson at shooting guard, Tim Hardaway Jr. backing up Simone Fontecchio at small forward, Bobby Klitman backing up Tobias Harris at power forward, and Isaiah Stewart backing up Jalen Duren at center. And then guys that may or may not be in the rotation is Marcus Sasser as the third shooting guard off the bench. Ron Holland, who the Pistons just drafted with their fifth overall pick, as the third small forward off the bench. Doesn't have anybody in as a third power forward off the bench. Is Paul Reed, who the Pistons did pick up off of waivers this summer as a third string center off the bench. And for the fourth players off the bench, all he had was Wendell Moore Jr. If you guys do remember, he was part of the trade that the Pistons did make during the second day of the NBA draft this past summer that acquired Bobby Klitman, and the Pistons had to take on Wendell Moore Jr.'s contract. So Wendell Moore is a fourth string small forward in this depth chart piece by James. So we're going to get into this starting lineup first. Okay. I think we can all agree on three positions: point guard, power forward, center. I think most of us have Cade Cunningham as the opening night point guard on this team. I think a lot of you guys probably have Jalen Duren penciled in as center. I have Tobias Harris penciled in at power forward too. I think there are some people that believe he could play small forward. There's some people that believe I know this is like kind of just like way off base. I saw some comments from people saying that, Tobias Harris shouldn't start, which I think he's going to start. You don't give him all that money if you don't plan on starting him. And I think him being out in the starting lineup next to Cade Cunningham is good. It's going to give him a floor spacer and give him a guy that can score on all three levels. So I tend to agree with James here. Simone Fontecchio, very interesting. I think there's a couple of different ways you can go in terms of who do you want to pencil in at small forward for the Detroit Pistons? Who do you feel would be the best fit at that small forward position? I've gone back and forth with it personally. I've had Asar penciled in here before. I had Simone at the top of summer, like around like May, June. I thought he could be a small forward before we really hit free agency. And the draft, I thought you could put him in at a starting small forward, but that's what James has. I'll kind of give you guys my thoughts on it after we do address the shooting guard. So shooting guard, he has Asar Thompson, who have not seen anyone actually put Asar Thompson in at shooting guard in any depth chart piece I've seen from beat reporters to even national pundits. Like I saw Basketball News, who's a pretty big publication. They had Asar Thompson in at small forward, not shooting guard. So this is actually interesting. So I want to kind of give you guys my thoughts on the shooting guard position and the small forward position. So I'll start with the shooting guard position. I think on paper, if you look at this starting five that consists of Cade, Asar Thompson, Simone Fonzecchio, Tobias Harris, Jalen Duren, you have two floor spacers in Simone Fonzecchio and Tobias Harris that would prove enough floor spacing out there to where you wouldn't be so much concerned um, with the lane being clogged like it was last year, with having a Sar out there with Jalen Duren and Isaiah Stewart. You have more floor spacers in Simone Fonzecchio and Tobias Harris. Now, with Sar at the shooting guard position, I think defensively you could do some stuff. You could switch some stuff. It makes sense on paper. My questions would be, how are we going to be using Asar as a two guard? Not to say that I don't think Asar Thompson can't play shooting guard. I think he could play, 1 through 3 personally. He can defend 1 through 5, but that's just my opinion. I like it. It's different. I would just have my questions with Asar at shooting guard. Now, I know a lot of you guys want to put Jaden Ivey in here in at that shooting guard position in terms of just like having him next to Cade Cunningham in the backcourt. I understand it. I personally had Malik Beasley kind of penciled in right here at the shooting guard position next to Cade Cunningham just to provide floor spacing. I know Malik Beasley defensively isn't a player that, a lot of us, we know that's not his strength. That's not something that he's known for. He's more known for stretching the floor and taking a lot of threes and making a lot of them. But I think it's different. I like where James's head is at with possibly a Sar at shooting guard, but me, I would probably have Malik Beasley. Now going into small forward, you have Simone Fontecchio at small forward. Again, I said at the top of this podcast that I had Simone kind of penciled in at small forward if the Pistons really didn't address that need in terms of like free agent or drafts. I had no idea what they were going to do. I don't think anyone really did. I think we were just kind of wait and see approach. But I do like Simone in here at small forward. I think it makes sense to have him in at small forward if you plan on having at least one good defender out there in Asar Thompson, because you can do some stuff. You can hide people because Asar can basically switch and defend point guard through center. We saw it last year of him just taking on that defensive assignment, crashing the glass hard. And I think he's a player that is so versatile on this team that he's going to be used in a lot of different situations and play a lot of different positions, in my opinion, anyways. But I think for small forward, I've gone back and forth with Simone or Asar, but I'm not mad with Simone in its small forward as long as you have another defender out there to at least have some kind of defense out there, in my opinion. But that's the starting five with James. Again, for people listening on the audio side, not watching this live on YouTube, the starting lineup from James Edwards III would be Cade Cunningham, Asar Thompson, Simone Fontecchio, Tobias Harris, and Jalen Duren. So that's the starting lineup. Let's get to the bench unit because I think this is going to be debated. This is going to be talked about probably just as much. We could start with the backup point guard. Now, this is a position where I think a lot of us have a lot of questions. We still have questions about it. Who is going to be the backup point guard? Is it going to be Sasser? Is it going to be Ivy? Are they going to bring in a backup point guard? Are they going to go get a Markelle Fultz? Are they going to at least acquire someone where we have a little bit more certainty of with this position? Now, James has Jaden Ivey in this, and he's had kind of like that stance all summer, and even other beat reporters have as well. As Jaden Ivey can play backup point guard. And I do want to say this because I think when we look at these depth charts, sometimes we get a little bit reactionary, or we hear these depth charts from our reporters that cover this team. Just because Jaden Ivey is penciled in not starting next to Cade Cunningham doesn't mean they can't see the floor together. I think there's instances where Jaden Ivey and Cade Cunningham can be staggered. That's what JB Bickerstaff said in his presser. And I think one of these guys is going to be on the court at all times. And I think there could be situations in games where both of these guys could be sharing the court together. I don't think just because Jaden Ivey is penciled in as a backup point guard means he's going to stay there. He could play well enough to the point where JB Bickerstaff may be forced to slot him in at shooting guard next to Cade Cunningham. That's just my stance on it. Would not surprise me if you do see Jaden Ivey play some backup point guard with the second unit. But that's just my stance on it. I know you guys will have your opinions on it as well if you are watching live. In the chat right now, would not surprise me whatsoever if you don't agree with this depth chart at all, because Jaden Ivey's not starting next to Cade. So the backup shooting guard position is Malik Beasley, which I told you guys I had Malik Beasley in my starting five next to Cade Cunningham as the starting shooting guard. I don't hate Malik Beasley off the bench. I think Malik Beasley is a guy that a lot of us were pretty surprised that we got him for what we got, but I think that has more to do with the new CBA and a lot of teams not wanting to get into that second apron. And if you look where Malik Beasley came before, Milwaukee's a very expensive team, but they were very fortunate and lucky to basically swap him out with Gary Trent Jr. I don't hate it. I think it makes sense because you do want some floor spacing out there. If Jaden Ivey is going to be running the second unit, and Malik Beasley's another vet out there that can kind of calm stuff down if it goes haywire. So Malik Beasley as a backup shooting guard or a starting shooting guard, I can see possibly happening. Now, this is one where I'm kind of puzzled a little bit. Not to say that I don't think Tim Hardaway Jr. can't play backup small forward with Simone Fontecchio, backing up Simone Fontecchio, if you will, excuse me. He's 6'5". He can shoot. Not a lockdown defender, but you know what you're getting out of Tim Hardaway Jr. Like, you're getting a guy that is going to take a lot of threes, and if they go in, we're happy. And if they're not going in, it's just like, okay, I guess it's just, a backup, if you will. I have my questions, but I also understand that the Pistons don't necessarily want to rush Ron Holland into backing up Simone Fontecchio right away. Again, much like Jaden Ivey, I don't think this is a depth chart that is going to be for a full 82 game season. There could be, situations where maybe you need more defense, so you plug in Ron Holland, off the bench, backing up Simone Fontecchio. Or Ron Holland could just have a really good rookie campaign and earn JB Bickerstaff's trust, earn the coaching staff's trust in terms of starting him possibly down the line. You never really know, but I think this is going to be a very slow grind process with Ron Holland. I think you having a Malik Beasley and Tim Hardaway Jr. off the bench with Jaden Ivey, you're having a lot of floor spacing around him, so he can just go to the lane and just kind of kick it out. So you're going to have a lot of floor spacing and perimeter shooting around a guy in Jaden Ivey who I think as a point guard, I like him more. It's just decision making right now is something that he has to get better at. And I think we all understand that. And he's still really young. He's only going into his third year. He's not a finished product yet. But Tim Hardaway Jr., I was kind of confused by it, kind of puzzled by it. But I guess if you're kind of looking at it from a floor spacing perspective, it makes a little bit of sense. Now, the backup power forward, James had Bobby Klittman, who was the Pistons' second round pick. And I think we all fell in love with Bobby Klittman as soon as we watched Summer League. His ability to knock down shots, I should say outside shots, 3-point shots, was something that a lot of us were like, okay, we might have got something here in the second round with Bobby Klittman. His passing as well, I think, is very underrated, not really talked about too much among people. It does help that he did play some guard when he was younger, So you kind of see that from time to time. We saw it a couple times in the summer league of him just making like really good reads, really good passes. So backing up Tobias Harris in a depth chart, I like it. I know some people believe that Bobby May or Bobby. I think it's Bobby. I'm not sure if it's Bobby or Bobby. I'm just going to start calling him Bobby. Um, Bobby backing up Tobias. I think some people had penciled him in with the Motor City Cruise. I don't know. I think we're going to have to wait and see how training camp progresses and how preseason goes because maybe he's not going to spend time with the Motor City Cruise. I know some people will, kind of mention like, yeah, he shot really good from the outside in the summer league, but when he wasn't shooting a 3-point shot, his percentages were not that impressive. And I think it's just a weight thing with him. He's got to add more weight at the end of the day. But that's the only like real thing I could think of why he may not get consistent backup power forward minutes. But I think his only thing and his only flaws is really just physique at this point because he's a very smart basketball player. If you want him just to play defense, he'll play defense. If you need him to facilitate, he can facilitate. If you need him to hit some, big time 3-point shots, we saw it in the summer league. He can hit some pretty nice 3-point shots. But backup power forward for Bobby Klitman. I think a lot of you guys would probably like that. I do too. I think there's a lot to like about him, and I see a lot of Pistons fans talk about him more than they've been talking about Ron Holland recently. So this kind of shows you how high the fan base is on him in terms of just like the type of player that he may turn into. And I think that's exciting if you're a Piston fan. So the backup center position. Now, I think this is going to be debated pretty heavily too, because Isaiah Stewart last year was the starting power forward next to Jalen Duren, and he was kind of played into a role where he was the stretch four. He was the guy that tried to provide perimeter spacing for Cade Cunningham, but James has him penciled in as a backup center. Now, I think this is the role that I've been kind of saying, like, I like Isaiah Stewart, but I like him more in 20 minutes a game versus 28 minutes a game. I think this is the right role for him. I think this is a role for me where I would feel confident with him playing backup center, but it's not an everyday thing either. Excuse me. And what I mean by that, there's going to be nights where Isaiah Stewart may not play backup center. He may play backup power forward. I think it is dependent on matchups. It's dependent on the team you're facing. Um, but I do think Isaiah Stewart will still get some pretty big minutes. He may be the seventh man off the bench, maybe the sixth man off the bench, because he provides a lot of the things that this team currently needs. He provides a communicator, he provides defense, switchability, being able to stretch the defense out, hitting threes. He does have a little bit of a post game. We haven't really seen it. We saw it a little bit last year. It's not a lot his rookie year, but I think there's a lot of layers to his game that really haven't been untapped yet. And I think this coaching staff is going to spend a lot of time with him because he's the type of player that I think can really impact more on the bench versus starting. But that's just kind of been my opinion for a while now. I think a lot of you guys probably have the same opinion. You like him off the bench more than you would probably like him in the starting lineup. And that's not to say he's not a good player. It's just he's more valuable in the second unit than starting. Now, getting into kind of just the players that are slotted in as the third players off the bench. So we're talking about Marcus Sasser as a third string shooting guard. Ron Holland is a third string small forward, and Paul Reed is a third string center. So let's talk about Marcus Sasser. Now, it's difficult because he had a pretty good season last year. There were games where the Milwaukee game is one I always reference. Um, he's a very good player. Summer League was kind of confusing because it looked like the coaching staff was trying to groom him to be a backup point guard, which I don't really think that's his game. I think he's more of a player that makes sense as a shooting guard, off the bench, being able to just come in and get you a bucket if you need it. I think that's what he's going to be in the NBA, in my opinion. But James has him slotted in as a third string shooting guard. I mean, when you go out and get guys like a Malik Beasley and Tim Hardaway Jr., they're most likely going to be playing above Marcus Sasser on a nightly basis just because they're vets and they're proven. Now, Marcus Sasser obviously had a good rookie season, but he just doesn't have that seniority yet, like a Malik Beasley or Tim Hardaway Jr. have. And I think if he does get minutes, which I think he will get a little bit, um, he's just going to have to earn JB Bickerstaff's trust. And I think once he earns his trust, the minutes could go up. There could be situations where if Sasser's hot, you just leave him in and let him cook. And again, like I had mentioned the Milwaukee game, like that's one game. Like if you're not too sure of what Marcus Sasser may or may not be in the NBA, I think that's at his peak, that's what he could be. Like he just absolutely took over that game. Now, Ron Holland is a third string small forward. Now, I know some of you had asked, like, is Ron Holland going to be a backup small forward on this team? And I don't really have a clear cut answer for you guys. I don't know. I haven't watched a preseason game yet. None of us have. It's going to happen in a couple of weeks as we're recording this on September 17th. But I think there's a pathway for him to eventually be in a 10-man rotation. The thing is, I believe Trajan Langdon and the coaching staff, they're going to really be careful with developing him. And I think that's the right approach. Instead of just throwing him out into the wolves, let him get reps. Maybe you ease him on in like a good 8 to 10 minutes a night. See what's there. If he makes mistakes, you can sit down with him. You can watch some film and you can slowly boost his confidence up. I think the only reason why Asar Thompson got thrown into the wildfires because we really didn't have anybody else, and he didn't crack under pressure whatsoever. I think Bojan actually being injured last year for a majority of the season was actually a blessing in disguise because you got to see how special Asar was defensively and his ability to kind of play different roles throughout the season. But I think they're going to be very careful with Ron. He may or may not get some, time with the crews just so he doesn't, just sit on the bench and, get rusty. Wouldn't be surprised if you see him out there for maybe a couple of games just to, get some reps with the crews and stay in shape. But I'll also think him, sitting on the bench, learning, going in practices against Simone Fontecchio and all those guys, and Asar Thompson. He can also develop that way. But my stance on it is I think the Pistons are going to be very, very careful and just kind of tread lightly of how they develop him because I think Trajan Langdon, drafting him with the 5th overall pick this past summer, he's banking on this kid to be a two-way player. And basically said, that's why we brought in Fred Vincent. We brought him in because we think he can develop. He can be a two-way star in this league. And I think that too. I think Fred Vincent is going to be very crucial for Asar Thompson and Ron Holland and others on this team. Now, there was no backup third string power forward. So, again, I think you could see situations where Bobby Klitman could be the backup power forward. And you could also see situations where maybe it's Isaiah Stewart as well. Now, the third string center is Paul Reed in this depth chart. Okay. Now, I think some of us were surprised by the Paul Reed signing, but some of you guys called it, and I will give you guys that credit. I know there was several of you during the summer that called Paul Reed as soon as he got waived. Like Pistons are probably going to go get him. Paul Reed is an intriguing player, and it's kind of hard to pencil him in at any position in terms of like, I don't think the Pistons want to experiment anymore with the two big lineups. Now, you could do that with Paul Reed and Isaiah Stewart. I don't think they want to, though. Again, I think the backup center position, this is just my opinion. I don't think it's going to be penciled in like this. I think there could be nights where Paul Reed gets the backup center spot, minutes, if you will, And I think there could be nights where Isaiah Stewart gets the backup center minutes. And it's always good to have um, players like a Paul Reed because you never know. This team's injury history, knock on wood, has not been the best. There could be situations where someone gets hurt and you have Paul Reed as an insurance policy, and it's a pretty good insurance policy to have. If you do ask me, he's a good player. I think him and Isaiah Stewart are good players to back up Jalen Duren. But again, I really don't know what to think of where to put him in at. I think some of you want him to play backup center. Others that I've seen, like other, people that do watch this podcast and listen to this podcast, a lot of you guys have said like maybe Isaiah Stewart plays that backup center position. I'm not really sure what happens, but just kind of reacting to this depth chart by James that he did put together. So he has Paul Reed penciled in as a third string center. So the four stringers. Wendell Moore Jr. You guys, I'm not going to waste your time. I don't have too much to say about Wendell Moore Jr. I'm not sure if this guy's even going to make the roster. I think the only reason why he is on this team is because the Pistons wanted to acquire Bobby Klitman on draft night, and we had to take on his money to get him. I'm just not too familiar with him. I did watch a couple of games of him. There's some flashes defensively, but I really don't know if anything's there. I don't know if the Trajan Langdon and the Pistons view him as a long-term piece. I'm not really sure, but this was basically the depth chart that James Edwards of The Athletic had for your Detroit Pistons. That was his final piece as a Pistons beat writer for The Athletic. Wanted to react to it. I thought it was very interesting. I thought there were some positions like a Sarge shooting guard that I think a lot of you guys will definitely debate. I also thought that having a guy like a Tim Hardaway Jr. as a backup small forward, I think you guys will debate that as well. Let me know what you guys think of this depth chart. Do you like the starting lineup of Cade Cunningham, Sar Thompson, Simone Fontecchio, Tobias Harris, and Jalen Duren? What do you think of Jaden Ivey coming off the bench, leading the second unit with Malik Beasley, Tim Hardaway Jr., and others? I will talk to you guys down in the comment section below. And if you are listening on the podcast side, if you would leave us a good review, it does help out the podcast a bunch. But I will see you guys later. Peace.